Today we'll be using our 3/8 gauge rabbit loom to make these super cute Eastern inspired chunky fingerless gloves. How adorable is that? Very warm. Tools you're going to need is you're going to need a loom tool, which I'm actually using my cindwood loom tool. I haven't used their ergonomic one yet, so I'm going to try that one out today. Kind of excited about that. Need a pair of scissors, and I've got tapestry needles. You can use tapestry needles or a crochet hook to weave your ends in. Let's get started. The cast on is the double Uwrap cast on, or modified Uwrap. So what I do is I'll kind of place the tail in. Actually, I'll angle this up so you can see. I just kind of hold the tail in with my finger, and then you wrap the peg 2 times. Take that bottom stitch over the top. Go to the next peg, wrap it 2 times, bottom over the top. You do this all the way around. It gives you a really nice stretchy cast on, which you can even take and kind of catch the string with your first loop. I'm at an odd angle here. Let me try it this way. You can take and catch the string with your first loop, so you already have that, and then pop it over. Much easier to do when you have, wherever you're comfortable working in your normal setup. Our cast on is done. Now we start with the bottom part of the cuff. For row 1 through 15, it is Uwrap 1, purl 1. So for your first 15 rows, and what I'm going to do is, let me move this stitch over. Sometimes you'll see like a little bump from that first peg. Oh, I dropped it. Okay. There we go. I fixed it. Sometimes you'll see a bump from that first peg. So I'm actually knitting the last stitch under it. Not something you have to do. That's completely optional. If you want, you can mark every other peg, because it's going to be purl knit for the entire project. The same pegs will be purled. The same pegs will be knitted. We do an up close. If you are unfamiliar with a purl stitch, you grab the yarn that is on the peg, take your working yarn underneath, grab it with your loom tool, pull that up. What you've done is created a new loop. You pop that new loop off. If you need to, you can make that loop bigger, because it's kind of like you've made a little pull string. So you can make that loop bigger if you need to, and then tighten it up. Now in doing so, one of the most difficult things I have found with loom knitting for myself, that's an Uwrap, and then we're going to purl the next one, is my tension. See, there's another purl. I'll show you that one again. You're going to pop that off. Take that new stitch, put it on. So purl, Uwrap, purl, Uwrap, purl, Uwrap. If you're making this for a child, you can do the same pattern, but change out your Uwraps for a flat stitch. It'll give you a much smaller size. Our first 15 rows are done. I've cut the yarn, getting ready to start a new collar. I went ahead, I haven't knit this last stitch off. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it and knit it over. I'm just going to tuck that in the inside, and when I come back around, these two white I will treat just as one. Now we start our aqua, and we're doing 4 rows. So I'm going to show you how to switch your collar. You can do one of two things. You can switch the collar in the same spot every time. You may end up with a noticeably thicker spot in that area, or you can kind of start it in random areas all around the loom. For example, here's an end I gotta snip, but I changed my collar there, and then I changed my collar down here, and then I changed my collar there, and I changed it there. So neither way is incorrect. For this one, what I will do is I'll start just a couple before. So I'm going to go ahead and E-wrap this peg, hold that stitch, and knit over. And then this is a purl stitch. Your stitches are not changing. They do not change through this entire thing. So that's an E-wrap. And a purl stitch. We are getting ready to start the white yarn, and this is the section where the thumb hole is, and you will do your first row and then 8 rows in flat panel, and then your last row. See this right here, that was a knit stitch, so this is, I'm gonna hold this the other way. This is a purl stitch. I'll go ahead and wrap that one. That is round 1. The rest will be in flat panels, so it'll be rows. The yarn is coming from this peg right here. So this is our first peg we work, and that one is an E-wrap. And we got a purl. This is your last peg. It's a purl stitch, but we are actually going to U-wrap it instead. So we're actually going to just wrap around the front, and this stitch, pull that over, and you can go back and knit off all your E-wraps, or you can knit them off as you go, it doesn't matter. But none of these stitches change. Your purls are still your purls, your E-wraps are your E-wraps. You are just going back and forth in a flat panel. We are at the end of our row 8, and we have an E-wrap, and then it's a wrap and turn. So go ahead and knit that off, and knit that off. Now we need to do a cable here. So I'm going to take this stitch, I'll move it over one. Now this stitch might be a little tight, which if it is, that's actually kind of good. That's a little more strength in that section. If it's twisted, you might need to untwist it. My problem is having all the strands. There we go. Now I take this one and put on the empty peg. Let me show you what this looks like up close. The stitch that was initially on this peg, you can see I stretched it over to this peg. This is the original stitch from here. I put over here, tightened it up. I'm going to tighten this even more when I weave it in. We are at our cast off point, and what we are doing is a basic bind off. It's really 3 steps. Step 1, you E-wrap your first 2 pegs and you knit those off, which means you take that bottom loop over the top. Step 2 is you take the stitch from the second peg, which is where your working yarn is coming from, put it on. I gotta set this down to do it. Put it on the first peg. You see, you can actually tighten that up. And then you knit over. Just make sure you grab both strands. Step 3, we've got an empty peg here. And if you're concerned whether you did this right or not, this stitch is where your working yarn is. But you just fill, oh, can make my hoop big enough now. You fill in the empty spot. I'll show you that again. Step 1, we are E-wrapping peg 1 and 2, and we are going to knit those off. Step 2, we are taking the stitch from peg 2, placing onto peg 1, and knitting that off as well. Step 3, we fill in. Down to our 2 last pegs. I don't need all this yarn, so I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it. We will still E-wrap both pegs and do our step 1, and then the step 2. Instead of step 3, we just take this working yarn, pull it up through, kind of like you're doing a purl. Pull the loop all the way through. And here we go. I will take that, weave this stitch right here. I can actually tighten it up. And I will weave that through there. Ends are woven. Look guys, we are all done. Our super plushy, warm, Easter egg inspired fingerless gloves. I love them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Questions and comments, please leave it in the comment section below.